Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, these two bills have achieved an unprecedented feat, an exploit. The unanimous rejection by all political parties of the opposition, all political parties in and outside Parliament. And yet, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, there is consensus that we need to regulate the financing of political parties. More than ever, today, there is a perception that our political system is plagued by what we call money politics. Now, of course, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, there may be absolutely legitimate reasons for a person to finance a political party which shares his ideology and values. For example, it is perfectly legitimate for a foundation which is fighting to save our beaches, to save the environment, to finance a political party that has on its agenda passing laws to protect the environment. Similarly, it is perfectly legitimate for lobby groups to finance political parties which share common grounds on issues such as abortion, death penalty, immigration policies, and economic policies. So this is the same all over the world. This is perfectly legitimate. But unfortunately, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, there are also those who finance political parties with a view of getting an advantage or a favor in return. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. I finance your campaign, and once you're elected, you give me specific tax concession, tax holidays, VAT exemption, land conversion tax exemption. I finance your campaign, and once you're elected, you give me pas géométrique, state land, development permit, exemption from requirement of EIA license. You intervene so that I can get banking facilities. You intervene so that banks reschedule my loan or write off my loans. I finance your campaign, and once you're elected, you give me millions, if not billions worth of contract, even if you have to bypass public procurement rules. Now, this sounds like outright corruption, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, but can we deny its existence? How many times have we not heard that someone is getting contract because he's a protégé, petit copain, petite copine, un bailleur de fonds? And similarly, how many times have we not heard someone complaining that he has not obtained a contract, that he's being harassed by the Mauritius revenue authorities just because he has financed a political party? So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, even where a political party receives perfectly legal funding, there is a case to regulate funding of political parties. But there is more. Money politics, unfortunately, in Mauritius goes hand in hand with illicit funding of political parties. People using ill-gotten funds to finance political parties. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, the link between drug traffickers and politics in Mauritius is unfortunately not new. Honorable Ratna referred to 1982, how people were selling Le Militant to raise finance for the MMM. But unfortunately, not all political parties had the same fate as MMM. I remember it was August 1983. It was the date of the result of the general election. I was 11-year-old, and my father, Honorable Reza Uteem, took me with him to his constituency on the day of the results. 1983, MMM won 3-0 in constituency number 3, Plain Viet. And all the 3 elected candidates got above 82% of votes. Just to tell you how strong MMM was in that constituency. And I was an 11-year-old boy, and suddenly I heard a gunshot. And then a parade of cars with a notorious drug trafficker sticking his out as of the window as he passed in front of my father, saying, "Gouvernement donne-nous l'armée." These were the days, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, where people was carrying tentes remplies d'argent, to finance politicians. And Mr. Speaker, sir, what had to happen happened in December 1985, when the population awoke to find out that 4 of our members of the Legislative Assembly had been arrested in Schiphol, Holland, carrying 20 kilos of heroin, the Amsterdam boys. 3 years later, in February 1982, the Commission of Inquiry on Drugs, chaired by Maurice Roux, published his report. Damning report, again citing a number of politicians, a number of businessmen, facts to indicate that they were linked with drug traffickers. And it is very telling, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, what the report says at page 7, and I quote, "No political campaign can be run without vast sums of money, and only hypocrites deny that in raising funds, all major political parties accept contribution without pausing to ask if money brought to them smells or not." So that was the rapport Roux in 1987. Unfortunately, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, 30 years down the road, nothing much has changed. The Commission of Inquiry on Drug, chaired by the former Justice Mr. Lam Shaming, published its report last year, July 2018. The Commission devoted a whole chapter 16, whether there is any evidence of political influence in the drug trafficking trade. Damning report. Damning report about the link between politicians and drug traffickers, not just in Mauritius, but also in Rodrigues. The Commission of Inquiry mentioned witnesses coming forth and saying that there were bags full of money being put in cars of candidates. That there was a notorious drug trafficker who came and said apparently he had financed a political party because all his lawyers belonged to that political party. And the Commission of Inquiry recommended, and I said, the government, that's at paragraph 18.4, the government must urgently look into the funding of the political campaigns of parties in order to prevent funding by traffickers. So it is a reality, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, the link between drug money and politics. And this is why we need a law to regulate the financing of political parties. And as honourable members before me has alluded to, it is not the first time, it's not the first attempt to try to regulate financing of political parties in Mauritius. In 2002, under the MSM government, there was the Sachs Commission. The Sachs Commission, the Commission on Constitutional and Electoral Reform, chaired by Mr. Justice Albie Sachs. And the Sachs Commission even came up with a draft bill on the public funding of political parties. Then in 2004, there was a parliamentary select committee chaired by the former Attorney General, Honorable Emmanuel Lunching, which considered the Sachs report, and they also come up with a draft bill on public funding of political parties. More recently, we've had the ministerial committee chaired by the then Deputy Prime Minister, Honorable Xavier Duval, which issued its summary of proposal in April 2016. And finally, last year, the government published its proposal on financing of political parties in November 2018. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the object of the bill, the first object of the bill, is to provide for accountability and transparency with regard to the financing of political parties. Fair enough. Honourable members have spoken about that. Yes, we need transparency, we need accountability. But there's also another major objective of regulating the financing of political parties, and this is to create a level playing field for all political parties, for all candidates standing for election. And it is unfortunate, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, that this very important objective of any law to regulate political funding is completely absent from a bill before this House. It is important, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, that in a true democracy, that every person, every citizen should have the same equal right to be elected. But we know, we're all politicians here, we know running a political campaign costs money. We need to communicate our manifesto, our program to the electorate. Publishing pamphlets, leaflets, posters costs money. Holding public gathering, getting a stage, loudspeakers, decoration, costs money. And now with high-tech communication and everybody is increasingly making use of small clips, all this costs money, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. And not every citizen has the same amount of money, and not every citizen has access to the same amount of money. And this is why, and this is where the principle of state funding comes into play. And this is not new. The Sachs Commission, the Parliamentary Select Committee, the Ministerial Committee on Control of Financing of Political Parties, and even the government proposal of last year, all of them recommended some sort of state funding. Honorable Ratna referred to the report of the Select Committee chaired by Emmanuel Lunching with regard to the argument for and against state funding. But what the Honorable Ratna forgot to mention is that the Select Committee drafted a public funding of political parties bill. And the Select Committee recommended that a fund be set up. At page 17, this is what the Select Committee writes. A specified total amount of resources should be earmarked annually in the budget to finance a special fund to be set up and administered by the Electoral Supervisory Commission. The latter may in turn allocate from this special fund an amount of money annually to all political parties in proportion to their electoral support. The committee also went further and said, with regard to the opposition, the committee is of the view that it should be given a measure of support to compensate them for those facilities that are otherwise not available to them, but available to the governing party. Political parties, especially opposition parties in Parliament, may therefore be given an additional financial support to assist them in the performance of their parliamentary duties. This is what the Select Committee recommended, not that there is no state funding. And today, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, when I listen on the radio, when I read in the press, I don't hear what the honourable people from the honourable members from the government is saying, that there is an outcry. Yes, we can dispute the quantum to be allocated. We can dispute where the money should come from, whether it should be the state who fund, or it should be a special fund, whether all contributions should go to that fund instead of going to political parties. We can discuss about what is the allocation method. Is it the number of votes that you get during the election? Is the money paid before the election, after the election? These are details that can be ironed out. But today, even trade unionists are in favor of some sort of public funding. Even Mr. Bislal, he mentioned that at least state should take care of the cost of printing, bulletin, and pamphlet that are distributed during an electoral campaign. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I think at the end of the day, we have to shoulder our responsibility. We have to decide, one and for all, what do we want? Do we want an amount of state funding, or do you want money politics to stay and have its way? And when we look at what is being proposed, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, every party can spend 1 million rupee per constituency. Every candidate can spend 1 million rupee. That makes you a total of 80 million rupees for a general election. 80 million rupees. How many political parties today has 80 million rupees? And let me remind the House, today, the limit on spending is 150,000 rupees per candidate. So if you multiply that by 60, it gives you 9 million rupees. So from 9 million rupees, we are increasing the ceiling to 80 million, almost tenfold. And that is not all, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. This law has to be read in conjunction with the Representation of People's Act. Now, what does the Representation of People Act say? Section 51, subsection 2. In determining the total expenditure incurred in relation to the candidate of any person at any general election shall not be had to any expenditure incurred before the notification of the date fixed for the election in respect of service rendered or material supplied before such notification. So the 80 million rupees kicks in only after there is a formal announcement of the elections. Now, like the Honourable Prime Minister liked to remind us, only he knows when there will be the election, the general election. So only he knows when to spend and when to stop spending before the date of announcement kicks in. So for government, for political parties who are in the government, the 80 million is not even applicable. It's only for the opposition, because the government can buy all the material, all the oriflamme, all the expenditure that they're going to incur. They can already stop it before the date of election is announced. So even this 80 million is not accurate. And this 80 million is not accurate because it does not include several items of donation. If we look at section 2, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, at the definition of donation in kind. Donation in kind means, and then there is 1, 2, 3, 4. So it means that donation in kind is limitatively defined. So if an item of expenditure does not fall within the definition, it is not donation in kind. So for example, food and drink, which represent a major expense for bars, that is not included. So you can give how many food and drink you want, that's not included. The premises you're going to use for bars, this is not included. The salvette you're going to use, the sonorisation you're going to use, this is not included. But more importantly, the transport. The transport and the petrol you're going to use on the day of the election to take electors from their house to come to polling station. Major item of expenditure. Everybody here in this house knows how much it costs on the day of election to rent cars, to give petrol, to take people out of their house to vote. This doesn't fall in the definition of donation in kind. So you can have someone give you for free. You will not have to account for it in your return. So 80 million really is not likely to be the threshold, the actual amount spent by those parties who has the means to spend. So, Deputy Speaker, sir, when I look at, it's unfortunate that there's no one from the State Law Office, because I have a few drafting issues also. If we look at Section 6, subsection 3, Section 6 provides for the registration of political parties. There's a mechanism. You will have a lawful association once you are registered with the Electoral Supervisory Commission. We are all for this. However, what happens if the Commission, the Electoral Supervisory Commission, after considering your application, they decide not to register you as a political party? There's absolutely no appeal mechanism provided today in this bill, which means that the default provision is that any aggrieved party will have to go by way of judicial review. And we all know how long it takes to get judicial review. You have leave stage and then you have hearing stage. It's likely to take weeks, months, if not years. And by that time, the election is gone. So I would humbly request an amendment be brought so that there is an appeal, a fast-track appeal mechanism in front of the judging chambers within a specified time period so that any political parties who find itself, whose application for registration is rejected days before the election, can have recourse to a judging chambers and be registered as a political party. Next, we have Section 8, donation. Section 8, subsection 2 reads, no person shall make a donation to an individual member of a registered political party other than the treasurer of that party. Now, this is an absolute prohibition, because if we go under 8, subsection 3, it says, any person who makes or accepts a donation in contravention of section 1 or 2 shall commit an offense and shall on conviction be liable to a fine not exceeding 1 million rupees. So if you give money to a candidate, or if a candidate receives money, he's guilty of an offense. You can make only donation to the treasurer of your party. Now, two things flow from that. First, no one can finance you. Not even your family, not even your friends, not even your neighbors, not even people who believe in you. They can only finance the treasurer. But secondly, once the treasurer holds the purse, he controls all the members of his political party, because he's the one who's going to give you the money. You can't raise funding outside of your political party. So you may this provision may lead to a dictatorship of the party, dictatorship of the leaders. You have to, come and praise the leaders, because it is the leader who has the right to receive money. You can't receive money. Even if people want to give you money, you can't. Under this law, you can't accept money. So it would be dictatorship of the leader of parties. This is the effect. But there is more, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. This clause is contrary to the Representation of People's Act. Section 50, subsection 3b of the Representation of People Act says, and I quote, all money provided by a person other than the candidate for any expense incurred on account of or in respect of the conduct or management of an election, whether as gift, loan, advance, or deposit, shall be paid to the candidate or his election agent, and not otherwise. So we are asked to enact a law, section 8, subsection 2, which makes it an offense for a candidate to receive money, when we have section 50, subsection 3 of the Representation of People Act, which tells you that if someone other than the candidate receives the money, it is an offense. So, again, I'm very sorry, I don't see the members from the state law office, but at the very least, we need to reconcile these two provisions of the law. And then, if we go further, section 52 of the Representation of People's Act. Section 52 reads, no expenditure shall be incurred in respect of the candidature of any person at any election except by the candidate, his agent, or a person authorized in writing by the agent. So section 52 again tells you it's only the candidate or the agent or someone authorized in writing by the agent. No mention at all of expense incurred by the treasurer or by the political party. So again, it is an offense. What we're asked to vote will go against section 52 of the Representation of People's Act. And what is the consequence, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir? Section 55 of the Representation of People Act provides, where any expenditure incurred in contravention of section 51, 52, 53, or 54, the person by whom such expenditure was incurred and the candidate in connection with whose candidature it was incurred shall be deemed to be guilty of an illegal practice. So what we're doing today is legalizing what is effectively an illegal practice today under section 55 of the Representation of People Act. If today you have a treasurer who takes money and spends it on behalf of the candidate, it is the candidate and the treasurer will both be guilty of an illegal practice. And yet, we have consequential amendments at the back of this bill, but nothing talks about Section 50, Section 52, Section 55. Next, Section 9 of the bill. Section 9 has a list of prohibited donations. We have no problems with it. You can't have a donation, 9(1)G, from a non-citizen. Okay, non-citizen cannot generally finance a political campaign. I don't have any problem with that. But what about a citizen who is married to a non-citizen? What if someone wants to stand as candidate in an election, is married under the legal regime of comité de biens or separation de biens, and his wife or her husband wants to finance his campaign, but that spouse happened to be non-citizen? You can't do it. We had this situation before. 1976, there were candidates in Mauritius in the elections whose husband and spouse were not Mauritians. So I think at the very least we have to carve out under Section 9 donation from non-citizen other than spouse of Mauritian citizen. At least we won't have a discrimination between a candidate who is married to a Mauritian and a candidate who is married to a non-citizen. Section 10, suspicious donation. This is a section, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, which provides that a registered political party shall not accept a donation if he knows or ought reasonably to have known that the donation originates from proceeds of a crime. For me, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, this is the most important provision of this bill. This is the clause that is going to fight money politics. A political party, a candidate, cannot accept money if he knows or ought to have known that it is proceeds of a crime. If he knows that the guy is a drug trafficker, if he has reason to believe that the money is proceeds from drug trafficking, he cannot accept this money. But what is the penalty? Subsection 2. Any person who accepts a donation in contravention of subsection 1 shall commit an offence and shall on conviction be liable only to a fine of 1 million rupees. You receive 80 million rupees, 50 million rupees from drug traffickers, and then you pay a fine of only 1 million rupees. And this section, again, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, is against the Financial Intelligence and Anti-Money Laundering Act of 2002. Subsection 3(1) of FIAMLA provides that any person who receives any property which in whole or in part, directly or indirectly, represent proceeds of crime, commits an offense. And under that law, FIAMLA, the penalty is 5 years imprisonment. 5 years imprisonment, and here it's 1 year. So it's 1 million, only a fine of 1 million only. So again, subsection 10, subsection 2, you know, it's too easy. And we know the type of ICAC that we have today. You know, they won't go under FIAMLA. They would say, good, okay, there is a specific offense under this bill. We'll go for only the fine of 1 million. Section 11, donation by company. This is a small point, but again, a drafting issue. Subsection 4 only talks about donation from company and say that company includes any society or other corporate entity. But today we have entities which are neither society nor corporate entity or companies. For example, trust. Trust is not a corporate entity, so a trust can donate the money and will not fall under this section 11. Section 12, register of donation. Honorable Béranger has dealt on it extensively. I'm not going to go too much in detail. Safe to say that we are all in favor. We are all in favor of having a register of donor. But where we don't agree is who can have access to that register and under what circumstances. So what we are proposing, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, in order not to frighten away donors who may be scared that government may know that they are financing an opposition party, that we limit the disclosure only upon an order from the judging chambers, and only if this information is necessary in connection with an investigation into a crime, money laundering, corruption, or electoral offense. But not a blanket disclosure, because, as Honorable Béranger said, we have full confidence in the majority of the members of the Electoral Supervisory Commission today. We have full confidence in the Electoral Supervisory Commissioner, but we can never predict what will happen in the future, who will be appointed on these positions, whether there will be political interference or not, because the EC will have, as the law provides, access to this register of donors. Next, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, would be Section 25. Section 25, and that is an important section. Section 25, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, reads as follows. The President may make such regulation as he thinks fit for the purpose of this Act. And subsection 2, any regulations made under subsection 1 shall be made after consultation with the Commission and the Electoral Commissioner. So we are enacting a law which will give the power to the President to make regulation after consultation with the Electoral Supervisory Commission and the Electoral Supervisory Commissioner. Now the question I ask myself, is that constitutional? Why did Mrs. Garib Fakim resign? Why is there a commission of inquiry to set up to find out why the former president set up a commission of inquiry without cabinet approval? And today we're giving this power to the president and nothing about acting in accordance with the cabinet. Is that constitutional? Let me remind the House what Section 64 of the Constitution provides. In the exercise of his function under the Constitution or under any other law, the President shall act in accordance with the advice of Cabinet or of a Minister acting under the general authority of Cabinet, except in cases where he is required by this Constitution, not by any law, by this Constitution, to act in accordance with the advice of or after consultation with any person or authority other than the Cabinet or in his own deliberate judgment. But again, I'm very surprised that State Law Office is not here, but the Attorney General is here, so I'm sure that he will have the time to intervene and give us a comfort. Because for me, you know, on the plain reading of it, Section 35 seems to be going against Section 64 of the Constitution, which requires the President only to act in accordance with Cabinet advice, unless if the Constitution provides otherwise. Here we're making a law telling the President, you know, you have to act after consulting, not Cabinet, but after consulting the ESC and the Electoral Supervisory Commissioner. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, after listening to all members of this House so far, it is clear that there is consensus that we need a law to regulate the funding of political parties. We need a law to register political parties and to make them accountable and transparent. But there's also consensus in this House, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, among all opposition parties and independent members from the opposition, not to vote in favor of the two bills in their present form. Suggestion has been made by all political parties, whether it is from the PMSD, the MMM, the Labour Party, or the MP, for the setting up of a select committee, because it's very easy to find a consensus. We're not that far apart from the government. And I am, again, making the call to the Prime Minister to pay heed to our call. Because if the Prime Minister, who needs the support of the opposition to get the three-quarter majority to pass the amendment to the Constitution, if the Prime Minister chooses to refuse to accede to the call of the opposition, then clearly he will go down in history as someone who never really intended to regulate financing of political parties. Thank you.